Welcome to Driving School WA YouTube channel. We're here at Joondalup Licensing Centre and we're going to go through one of the potential test routes that you might be going through when you go for your driving assessment here in Joondalup. It's important to take some notes out of this video, such as speed limits, double roundabouts, merging traffic, a lot of one-way turns and one-way streets, reverse parallel parking and parking in general. We're exiting the car park that's located opposite the licensing centre at Joondalup, and we're turning right on BOAS Avenue, so don't forget to stop at a stop sign. A significant number of learner drivers roll over the stop line, and as a result they fail at the beginning stage of their driving assessment. There are a lot of roundabouts in the area. See, that driver in the dark car indicated way too early, so you should never rely on indicators. You've got to check their position, the distance and the speed, so you can anticipate what directions will be in the next couple of seconds or so. Always check speed limits and make sure that you don't exceed the speed limit, because that would represent immediate fail. Speed limits can change sometimes. There could be roadworks, and they sometimes change the speed limit after the modification of certain roads. And we always recommend a long lesson on the day before your driving assessment, when you can check every speed limit, any potential modification, roadworks, school zones, so you ensure that you don't let something important slip your mind. Anticipate double roundabouts from a distance, because you have to know if there's traffic approaching and if you're preparing to slow down to stop. Also be mindful of solid unbroken white lines. You will usually find them here in Joondalup around traffic lights, and they would usually go for about 2 or 3 lengths of the car. Also, you will find them near the intersections that are not controlled by traffic lights, and you shouldn't cross them because you may potentially interfere with the traffic that's coming from the opposite direction. You have to recognize if you can turn only one way, because this is the most important thing, at least, by the number of the reports that we have that somebody turned or attempted to turn the wrong way. The examiner will not try and trick you, because that's against the law. Now, sometimes they may not say to turn left or right, because they will assume that you, as a driver who's about to get their driver's license, should know and should immediately recognize where there's a sign clearly stating one way. If you're approaching a double roundabout, you've got to make sure that you are in the correct lane, because if you're turning left, you would have to be in the left lane. If you're turning right, you would have to be in the right lane. The assessor will not separately ask you to change lanes, because that is your responsibility. So if they said, I'd like you to turn right at the roundabout, you will have to change lanes without them actually specifically asking you to do so. In this situation, you can't step on the white solid line on the right-hand side, because that would be immediate fail. Avoid cutting corners, even in the residential areas where there are no lines specifying where you should be. So just go nicely around without cutting corners. Here is one of many situations where you can only turn left, so it's very obvious, solid white arrow, and also make sure you give way to pedestrians whenever you are turning. A lot of people question, what about if there's no pedestrian crossing? So even if there's no pedestrian crossing, when you're turning, you've got to give way to pedestrians. When you stop behind a stationary vehicle at the traffic lights, make sure that you can see their rear tyres clearly. Here we've got a wide-angle camera. It seems that I'm a lot further than that. If there's a truck or a bus, you would stay a little bit further, roughly around 1.5 lengths of your car. Joondalup driving test route is probably the most diverse route in Perth. You got one-way roads, you have merges and double roundabouts, and you've got tiny laneways, and you've got unusual layouts of car parks. So if you pass your driving test in Joondalup, you must be well prepared. It's a lot more difficult to fluke it, such as reportedly in some regional driving test centres. By the way, we don't recommend to anyone to travel hundreds of kilometres to do the driving assessment in the regional driving test centre. Firstly, because you will have to know all the difficult stuff, which you may not encounter if you're driving in a rural area. So you're not going to have multi-lane roundabouts and, merges everywhere, high frequency of pedestrians getting out of the shopping centres, and opportunities to reverse park in different ways, such as reverse parallel parking, reverse bay parking to the left, to the right, or even forward parking between the two cars on the left, which is generally a lot more difficult. Change your mindset if you can. So don't wish that things were easier, wish you were better. There are enormous amount of places in Joondalup where you can do the reverse parallel parking. It's generally easy as long as your observation skills are up to scratch. So if the car appears from behind and you're in the process of reverse parallel parking, you would stop and wait until they pass you. Make sure that you use your mirrors, that you use your reverse camera if you've got one, but don't overuse your reverse camera. You have to combine your side mirrors, your rear view mirrors, to turn your head multiple times, left, right, rear window. Your posture behind the wheel must be adequate as well, so you can't sink into the seat and expect that you can cover all the angles. So improve your field of view, and that way it's less likely that you're going to let something slip your eye. Some streets in Joondalup can seem that they might be one way because they're too narrow, but you can see the cars and you can see the parked vehicles in this particular street. So that would, be a good reassurance that you're not going the wrong way. See, there's a cyclist lane on the left-hand side. If you're coming up to an intersection and you're turning, if you don't slow down significantly, there's no need to check the blind spot, but if the speed fluctuates, you may need to check the blind spot to see if there's a cyclist that potentially caught up with you and is about to overtake you. Flow plays an important role in your driving assessment. So if you're driving in a 60 zone, you shouldn't be 10 kilometers under. A lot of people report that they got failed for losing too many points for flow. So try to be as close as possible to the speed limit without exceeding it. Also, don't overspeed when you're turning 90-degree corners. Usually you'd be traveling around 20 to 25 kilometers an hour, but you have to be a lot more cautious when you're entering car parks. Even though it's the 90-degree corner, you've got to be a lot more cautious because it's less pace and you have to consider other traffic exiting the car park. So always drive to the conditions. Stopping for shopping can be reverse parking, reverse parallel parking, or even forward parking. So don't be surprised if your assessor says just park forward anywhere. If you do a standard reverse bay parking, use the 3-line guide. That way you can be more accurate, and also just make sure that your field of view is adequate. Reversing posture is important as well, because the better you are positioned when you're reversing, the more and better you're going to be able to observe. Check all the angles, and if there's somebody to give way to, just wait. Or if the driver that's behind you gestures to you to continue, it may be okay to do that, but still keep an eye on them throughout the process of your maneuver. Use your indicators. It's common courtesy. You're letting everyone know what your intention is. We call them indicators because we indicate our intention. When you're about to reverse park, you would indicate, if you're reversing on the left, you would indicate left, but when you stop, you would switch off the indicator prior to beginning your maneuver. They changed that rule back in October of 2017 when they changed the logbook rules, which is not the case in most parts of the world. The white solid line that's just in front of us represents the dividing line for cyclist lanes, so do give way to cyclists before you proceed. It is legal to cross the cyclist lane, like in this situation, if you were about to turn to the street or if you wanted to reverse parallel park behind that vehicle. But you may need to check your blind spot to ensure that you're not interfering with the path of the cyclist. We have a separate video on that topic, so you might check that out. Once again, we're coming out of the car park that's located opposite the licensing centre at Joondalup. You've got to stop at the stop line, and then you might turn right here, which is BOAS Avenue, and you might go all the way down to the car park to perform the exercise, stopping for shopping first, and then you would proceed with your driving sections and exercise left something behind. It's usually not congested around here. If you don't know the speed limit, always stick to the default 50 kilometers an hour, because some of the roads don't have speed limit signs. Also, I have to mention that if there are roadworks without any signage, so if there's no 40 kilometers an hour signs, you would still have to do maximum of 40 kilometers an hour. Reportedly, a lot of driving test candidates do reverse parallel parking on this street. Be aware that some assessors can ask you to reverse parallel park, and then to remember that particular spot where you parked, and then to drive off and to return to the same spot. So that would be exercise, left some behind, and potentially stopping for shopping at the same time. This is a great place to practice parking, reverse parking, forward parking, because it's pretty quiet most of the time and there's no restrictions how long you can stay. Sometimes we have reports that the instructors or private supervisors allow learner drivers to be inside of the car and practice reverse parking or forward parking while the supervisor is standing or walking outside and guiding them where to turn and what to do. Just to let everyone know, that is against the law, and no instructor or private supervisor should do that under no circumstances. As you can see, this particular street doesn't have markings, but you can easily judge whether it's a two-way or one-way because there's cars parked on the opposite side facing the opposite direction. When you're approaching roundabouts, always anticipate traffic from the distance. That way you're going to know if you're slowing down to stop or if you're getting ready to proceed. Always use your indicators promptly and correctly. When you exit, you've got to indicate left because you have to let other drivers know that you're no longer proceeding towards their direction. When you see drivers stepping out of their cars, be extra cautious because they might not be aware of your presence. This video was shot during the peak hour traffic, so it would have been about 4:30, 4:45 p.m. And as you can see, according to the density of traffic, Joondalup is probably one of the easiest places to pass your driving assessment. When you're turning on the road with multiple lanes, always go to the left lane unless you know that you're going to be turning right shortly. There are so many spots to perform reverse parallel parking. So my advice is that you don't hope that you're not going to get asked to do the reverse parallel parking. Practice as much as you possibly can and you're going to become better every single time. Same as with standard parking, you have to observe well. You've got to look at your rear window. You have to check your side mirrors, your rear view mirror. You can use your reverse camera, but don't overuse it. I've mentioned it a few times, but people do fail for overusing the reverse camera. What it means, they fixate their eyes to the reverse camera and they don't check the mirrors or windows. When exiting these types of car parks, you've got to indicate your intention where you're going. Also, if it's a little bit heavier traffic and if you can't squeeze through to the turning lane, you will have to wait, like in this situation. Now, given that we've stopped and if there's a cyclist travelling in the cyclist lane on our left, before we cross over to the turning lane, we've got to check the blind spot to see if there is a cyclist that we may potentially interfere with as we are transiting through the cyclist lane. Some main roads in Joondalup, such as Grand Boulevard, seem like they might be 60 zoned, but this is certainly 50, so check the speed limits everywhere. If you perform your driving test to the standard and you are just about to pass, even in the last minutes or seconds of a driving assessment, you can fail by exceeding a maximum speed limit. So be careful, check things out before you start your driving assessment because they can intermittently change the speed limit due to roadworks or if you're doing your driving assessment during school times, Monday to Friday, 7:30 to 9 a.m. and 2:30 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. It's a good indication that you may have passed if you've been out in the test for longer than 30 minutes, but don't make any analysis until you park the car and switch the engine off. So you've got to park your car, so listen carefully, don't celebrate prematurely. So if the assessor asks you, just park anywhere, pick the easiest spot. Just go forward in one of the bays. Doesn't matter where it is. Don't waste too much time picking the spot. Sooner the better. Unless the examiner asks you to park in a specific bay and in a specific way. Please feel free to ask any questions in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button so that YouTube recommends our content more frequently. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.